And I think a lot of these products are actually really good, but businesses, once they get to a certain level, they won't even look at it. They're like, no, we just go with Microsoft.
Well, it's laziness, so I don't have to think if I just keep paying the license.
Yeah. Welcome to the You're Doing It Wrong podcast. I'm your host, Christian, and today I'm joined by Jarrod, a longtime defense industry veteran, and he's joining me for a drink and a chat. Hi, Jarrod.
Hey, Christian.
I've got a little port today, port that I've aged for a while, just to enjoy while we're talking. What are you drinking?
What, you just left it outside to age or with bin juice?
No, it's in a barrel.
All right.
Yeah, I've got a barrel that I age things in, and I've got a video coming out about aging whiskey and port. So,
all right.
Yeah, stay tuned for that one.
I have no time for that. My wife for her birthday got a Stanley Cup, which is a Barbie theme. So I, of course, ran out and got myself a Ken Cup just to annoy her. So I'm sipping from that.
Do you fill it all the way up? Because it's a lot of coffee.
Yeah, I have to run off and have a pee every 3 seconds after about an hour.
Yeah.
Anyway, whilst I was thinking about what we're going to talk about today, this meeting came to mind. I was talking to Microsoft one day towards the end, and they had a data engineer to talk to us about big data. We were big data skeptics because, we make lots of ones and zeros, but to us, the size of the data doesn't seem big. It was just what we generated. We didn't really care about it. Anyway, he was a data analyst. He was telling us stuff. And he was telling us about a project he had with the Australian Army. And they had one of their light armoured vehicles. It might not even be armoured. But they wanted to be able to collect all the data out of the vehicle so that they could do logistics things like, I predict you're going to need fuel at this point, or your vehicle's going to need maintenance on this thing. And so the logistics would all work out. Really clever idea, but I started talking to the guy and he said, oh yeah, we're having a trouble because it's generating something like, a gigabit of data a second, and we've got to willow that down into what is actually usable from in the short message. So defense things tended to transmit really short message because connectivity is not always there, right? So you might send a single word, and that word means something in the dictionary to that system. And I said the other thing, because I'm a bit of a carnot, and I said, have you ever heard of OBD2? And he looked at me and I said, because every modern motor vehicle since the 80s had OBD or OBD2 fitted, and it does exactly what you're talking about. And he looked at me again and I said, if it was me, I'd be ringing up an automotive engineering company and say, hey, can you come and help me? Because you don't really have a big data problem. You have a lack of understanding of what your system is.
Yeah.
And then he looked at me as if I'd offended him, and I wasn't really caring if I'd offended him at the moment, but it sort of struck home to me, you can have the world's best technology solution, but if you don't understand your requirements, you may be just creating a solution for something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
They had the solution exists worldwide for that. Automotive companies like Ford and General Motors and Toyota, all of them currently use it. Yeah. It's really simple to do. But Microsoft are churning through big data to create some sort of output for the army. The other thing that I sort of quizzed them quite at the end against this, I said, have you talked to the actual operators about this? And they looked at me and said, why? And I said, well, if I'm in an army vehicle in a hostile environment and you transmit for me, I'm going to be mighty cranky. And they looked at me and said, right, well, this is one thing I learned from submarines, right? The first time I transmit, I've given away my location. The second time I transmit, I've given you the full fire control solution so you can shoot at me.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. Because in the submarine world, I've hunted for Red October. They go, give me one ping, Vasily. Yeah, submarines never transmit at sea because the first time they do it, they tell everyone where they are. The second time they do it, they can expect a torpedo coming their way. Because you've given away that whole solution. And, that's sort of the requirements, going back to the requirements. When you gather your requirements, go and talk to the people who are using the system because they're going to tell you that nugget that no one else will. If it's technology driven, no, you've got no hope. Because you'll go, hey, look at my shiny toy. And with that old grumpy dude in the back with the beard, he goes, yeah, that won't work because you haven't considered, and he'll just tell you something you would have never heard from anyone else.
Yeah. This is where we get a lot of project managers and project teams, and some nice management says, oh yes, we're going to put in this great new product and we want to go out to market to this. But yeah, nobody's ever actually used it. Is the actual end user of that product, and they don't know, like you said, what the needs are for those end users and how they use it and why they would use one thing or some capability or of that, but not others, right? So does it fit them?
Where I'm working now is I'm helping an ambulance service. They're going to go from, they have a current computer system they use in the ambulance. It was really good when it was brand new. It's just not that user-friendly and usable now. So I don't know if some of the viewers may know this, some may not. It is quite likely that if you get picked up by an ambulance in an emergency situation, they never actually know who your name is. And the first thing the hospital knows about is when they turn up at the front door. And so that's not uncommon in a lot of capital cities in Australia. And so the next generation, or the latest generation, is they have a computerized system in the ambulance. They spend their time to identify you. They spend a bit more time at the site. They identify you. The hospital already knows who you are because they've decided where they're going to take you. And the hospital can contribute electronically, and you can contribute back electronically. And, an ambulance may carry drugs that a paramedic's not licensed to administer, but they can get permission from a doctor to do that. And so that all happens a lot faster. So your episode of care is better. Everything that happened to you by the paramedic is in that episode of care. And when you get to the hospital, the record's already pre-populated into the hospital system. So everyone's working on current information, which is not always the case today. But the point I was getting to is this project is a very technology-heavy centric project. We're going to have mobile communications to compute in a vehicle that moves, and we're going to send records and what have you. But there's two project managers on the team. One's a very senior paramedic. The other one's a very competent technical operator. And they work lockstep. And, you look at some of the things, you say, oh, look, this vendor's got this product here, which we think is the same as that. And left to our own devices, we will write this paper about, hey, this is the product you need, and this feature here is going to replace the current system you have. All the enterprise architects are out in the world going, yay, standardize. And you think, on paper, it looks a really good thing. And then when you go and talk to the paramedics, says, we've got that senior paramedic, we've got access to two directors of the ambulance service. And if we need to, we can go and talk to the CEO. But when you talk to the paramedic, they go, yeah, no, that's really good. But the service we currently pay for is completely managed by an Australian accredited group who update it with current clinical process. If we buy that one, we have to do that ourselves. And that's a full-time job.
Yep.
And so those are the sort of things that you pick up. That's a pretty severe example, but when you start collecting requirements and going to the coalface and asking people and talking to them, those are the sort of things you find out, rather than, as we just said, that, I've got this shiny new toy, here you go and use it. And the end user sitting there going, I don't like this, it's the wrong colour, it's purple.
It's that total cost of ownership proposition, right? So, what are all the other things you need in addition, right? It's gonna
exactly. And we would have been quite myopic to that outcome because we're all technology people. All we want to do is get that really great solution to your front door, but it needs to be really great to everyone. Otherwise, I guess we're starting to morph into change management. If you can't take those people on the journey, they probably didn't want to go.
Exactly.
You wasted your money getting
there. Yeah. There's big ERP failures, throughout the world, and Australia's had some recently, especially the whole of government ERP, and there's been some other state government ERP and other big software implementations that I know have gone bad. California, a long time ago, I know they did $1 billion Oracle implementation. I think that never went anywhere, and I believe there's a couple of state senators, I think, that made some money out of that, and yeah, I think that was all an underhanded deal. But these massive software implementations, for government seem to be really difficult. And I think you touched on a lot of it. Are the requirements known? Do you have those end users on your team that can understand what the consequences of all those decisions are, and how they actually need to use the software? But I don't know. Is there any hope that governments will get better at this, or?
Look, I'm not going to call this out as bad, but the South Australian Department of Health just stopped their EMR rollout because they realised they didn't know their requirements.
Well, it's better to stop than to keep going down a bad path.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, they probably shouldn't have got there, but the fact that they realised that they were in that point and were brave enough to stop it before they dug the hole too deep should be applauded. And that sort of mentality needs to flow through all those government departments. Is put your hand up when you say, look, I think we've buggered this up, rather than just keep dumping money into what is going to be a complete turkey. There's a procurement process I just went through with a state government agency. They had their procurement process allows for no award, and usually when you do that, their legal group, the state legal group, applaud you for it because you haven't entered into a contract for something that they know is going to fail. You've just identified that these two vendors aren't in our best interest, so we'll go and have another go. And that was pleasing to me that they've done that. If I draw back on my previous experience, you look at defence is funny because sometimes it's a political war that made you make something. So the Taipan helicopters, there was tragedy with that. But if you look back about when that decision was made, we discounted. No, sorry, I'm getting helicopters mixed up. When that decision was made, there was a little bit of political ill will, and so with the US at the time, because of the president they had at the time, and we bought a European solution when we'd been using the Black Hawk for decades already, and common sense would say, well, you're experienced in it, let's go and buy them. And we see the same with the Tiger helicopters about to get replaced by the Apache. I don't know that many people know that the Tiger helicopter's never been accepted into service. So that project has been delivering for decades. It's just never delivered a finished product, and we're going to replace with Apaches.
Wow.
The French submarines are something similar.
Yeah.
We went with the European. Anyway, there's a myriad of projects like that are just going to get corrected in the next decade, which is sort of crazy,
Yeah, all the money that gets left on the table, and
because no one was willing to say, no, this thing sucks and blows, we're not going to buy it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy how that happens.
So it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. I think people are companies, governments. It happens in the private industry as well. Like, it's not all just governments that get this wrong. I think time you do it complex and it's nice and shiny and everybody goes, this is going to be the next thing since sliced bread. But yes, nobody looks at it critically. I think it's all too political, that you can't stop the shiny thing, right? Don't slow it down, right? Nothing to slow us down.
As with both experiences, that cyclic approach to architecture inside IT and technology programs, where all of a sudden it's flavor of the month, and then, oh no, you're costing us too much money. But when you start thinking about measuring against your requirements or the needs, or what do I already have in my catalogue, there's a lot of money to be saved by spending that money on that person who goes, yeah, I know you want to buy that new toy, but we already have it in this product here. Just reuse this. It'll save us lots of money. Or no, don't customize that to the nth degree, which is a funny story. I know a company that I may or may not have worked for in the past that customized a very big financial system so hard that it could only bill in US dollars and it could no longer do manufacturing. So they had to buy another copy to do manufacturing with. So they ended up with two of these systems. And because they had not followed what we would now believe to be common architectural practices, I was told anecdotally the fix for them to move to the cloud version that may or may not rhyme with HANA is about $1 billion to merge both systems in there and remove all their stupidity. And so there's that bit as well. We both work in those architectural roles where you can see the issues that are coming down the pipeline, and you say, look, I think we should discuss this because, you're buying another copy or another version or another widget that does the same as this one you already own. You should at least consider combining them or just using the one you already own or replacing the one you own with a new one. But your path at the moment is to have two, which is double the overhead, double the licensing, double the people to support it. And then the likelihood is, unless it's something like an SAP product or something like that where its whole job is to move data, they're not going to talk well. So you may have double entry happening as well. So, in a health setting, you may be entering the patient identity twice. Or in a billing setting, you've got two sets of addresses to look at or two sets of bills to look at. It's just crazy what some companies do because I'm only going to spend $10,000 today. And you're like, but you'll spend $100,000 every year after.
Yeah. And I have to say, integration is one of those big topics that people love integration, and they love, and integration can work really well if have real good quality APIs. You're set to a proper standard, but even then, if you're relying on an API or you're relying on integration across all these really big complex systems, there's so much more that can go wrong there, to me. And also you're relying on, the stability of both systems.
Yeah.
Right. So, to me, I think sometimes if one system isn't perfect, but it hits enough of the boxes, having that single pane of glass, that one system that can house as much as possible, is better than trying to integrate a whole bunch of smaller best off products.
Oh, you hear that program management thing thrown around all the time, 80-20. If it can do 80%, we're having it, and the other 20 will adopt. And as much as I think it's a bit of a weasel word, it's never a true word spoken. Sometimes it's better to change your process so you can adopt something wholly because it will save you in the long run. And vendors don't tend to sell, especially when there's like standards around process like finance and reporting and that. Vendors don't tend to sell you things that don't meet the current regulations.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to have to argue with the ATO or whoever your regulator is. They would rather you just keep giving them licensing money and going on the way it is.
Yeah, finance systems are they'll it's like use their methods because they've worked with general accounting practices. They understand how this should happen. Why are you customizing to create your own sort of workflow or something else? And it's like, no, there's general accepted accounting practices, right? That's a thing. And they're pretty much worldwide. So everybody should use that.
Yeah. And I guess, it comes to that when you're collecting your requirements, people say, oh, but we're special. And you're like, in the back of your head, you say it, don't say it, don't say it. No, you're not. You're not special at all. You might be difficult or you might be weird, but you're not special. Yeah. Somewhere else, because, there'll be a regulation that controls what you do or a process or a policy. All you need to do is explain that and we'll go off and do it for you or ask you if you want to do it a better way.
Yeah. And, and most of the time there's somebody else that has done that before. and has been the first in the industry to move to a new technology or whatever it is. So most of the time you're not going to be the first. So don't think you're special.
Well, if you're an Australian government agency and someone says, yeah, we're excited because we've never done this before, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That actually came up in a project I was just involved in, and we wanted to integrate all these different products into the core offering. And one of the integration architects said to me, if they're not going to use this more than once a day, then it's probably stupid to do. And I'm pretty sure one of the things they want to do is neither of the vendors ever done before, which is doubly stupid. And so we started talking about it as a group. And once we explained to the people who wanted the integration about how it was going to work out, they were quite adamant they didn't really need it. It was just a nice to have. Explaining the complexity of what they want. You're going to be the only people in the world. You're going to pay for the development, and if it doesn't work, they're going to say, "Yeah, we didn't really know how to do that in the first place." See you in court.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I see a lot of that. Oh, it'd be nice to have this and nice to have that, and but don't put those in your requirements. It's not a requirement. It's a nice to have. It's something to keep on your own list to know that, hey, if we look at all the extras that kind of will benefit us and things that would be great, if to differentiate products, you might keep that list, but not as a requirement. Nice to haves do not fit in your requirements.
Or if it is there, it's going to be might or could. And we're going to concentrate on should. And if we pick up some of the others, then so be it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's also been quite a lot of interesting stuff in the news lately. Another big cloud provider, I believe, has left VMware and Broadcom since the Broadcom purchase of VMware.
There's a bigger British financial company that moved.
Yeah, that's the one I think I was talking about or trying to remember who it was, but yes.
Yeah, they moved to an open source cloud management platform.
Open Nebula, which I haven't heard of that one before.
Yeah. But I read that and I thought, hang on, they've gone from VMware, and I actually think this is really good. But if you're one of their customers, you'd be asking a few questions because they've gone from we host all our own VMware stuff to we've got a little bit of VMware, but we're using Open Nebula to orchestrate cloud load.
Yeah.
So as a customer, you sit there going, so where's my stuff going?
Yeah. It wasn't really clear what exactly they were doing. I know that there are other customers in Europe, especially, that have gone and moved to XCP-ng, and they've got massive migration tools now, and consulting for moving from VMware to XCP-ng, which is the Zen. It's basically an open source version of Zen Server now that's been offshoot and maintained by French business. And I love Zen Server from 15 years ago. I always thought it was a much better product, more solid than VMware. But it does beg the question, does this mean we're back into the hypervisor wars again? I think XCP-ng is making kind of a resurgence for Zen Server. I know Nutanix has its own, and KVM is really building up. But Hyper-V is still around in the background, I guess, but I don't know anybody that's using it on a massive scale. But does this mean there's going to be competition again?
Well, the competition becomes different. So you're not just saying, I might go from ESXi to Hyper-V or to whatever's been offered in the corner over there, which, an aside, the AFP just released a RFT for moving their entire load from VMware to something else. And they do suggest Hyper-V as one of the things because they already pay for the Microsoft licensing, so cost-wise it makes sense. Technology-wise, I think we could wax on forever. But it opens the competition because, you've got Microsoft out there now openly to customers who are the right size. If you said to Microsoft, look, we don't like our VMware licensing, and you've got the right sales guy, he's going to say, hey, let us get a third party in, we'll measure your system, and we'll show you the chart to Azure.
Yeah.
So,
Just do an Azure stack.
yeah, so your competition's not just hypervisors now, it's also Google
Yeah.
Cloud, Azure, and AWS, and whoever
Yeah.
else is producing cloud stuff, So
Yeah.
I'm not sure Oracle has that big a footprint in Australia, but Oracle's there as well, right?
Yeah.
You can go
And you
away
have
on that licensing.
things. Yeah, you have the things like Cloud Stack and OpenStack, which can be hypervisor agnostic and orchestrate and have that, Azure style or AWS, Google Cloud style management of your network and storage and VMs all in one. So that, I think if people are leaving VMware, they're going to be looking at that sort of stuff too, rather than a pure hypervisor play.
Yeah, the report I saw from this third-party company on moving from VmWare to Azure actually showed how this application, and all your databases obviously became cloud native. This application, we just use a virtual server in Azure. And this application, we recommend you get rid of, or we can spin up a single instance of VMware in Azure for you.
Right.
And so they're being quite aggressive to get you to cloud native because you sort of become vendor locked in there, which, we're talking about antitrust on VMware and Broadcom and AT&T is suing. That's actually, I read today there's a settlement about to come from AT&T.
Yeah, I heard there was a settlement, between them.
That's going to have to be sweet as, otherwise AT&T we've got 2 years worth of support whilst we walk.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
But the Google, Azure, and AWS and Oracle things been going on forever, where they just keep on dobbing each other in for antitrust. I think the first thing that Microsoft got done for was when they decided to make Internet Explorer free. The other browser companies all kicked up a stink because it was antitrust. And then they welded it into Windows, and that was antitrust. And,
yeah, but they never got slapped for it. They had to create a European version where it was optional or something like that. But I think every manufacturer just didn't install that version anyways. They all installed it within in it, so it didn't matter. They just got around it. It was barely a slap in the hand hand.
And then, Google getting done for antitrust for monopolizing the search world. It's like, it's because everyone else sucks.
Yeah. It's exactly. It's they haven't. I don't feel like they've done anything malicious to knock anybody else out. It's just that it's better. It's a better search than Bing, right? And when Yahoo probably left when they had financial trouble and basically signed the deal with Bing, then there really hasn't been a good one since to come up. So
I remember this is a while back. There was a US Department of Defense project called JEDI. I'm sure there's a whole department in the Pentagon that just comes up with really good acronyms, but it was Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure, where they just wanted a single cloud platform for the whole of the US DoD. I don't even think the project had got too far past the request for tender when Oracle was already suing on antitrust because AWS had got, I think there was a conflict of interest and the requirements have been written for AWS and this, that, and the other. And Google's own employees had rioted and said, well, this is against their company values, so they pulled out of it. And then AWS and Oracle were stuffed, and Microsoft was sitting there with Azure and they're going, you beauty, we've won. And then the USDAD came to their senses, and as the defence projects often happen, they just cancelled it.
Yeah.
And now they've gone to we're going to consume the right solution for the right thing. But it's interesting. The interesting part of that is Oracle was suing for antitrust before project award. That's how aggressive they were about it. I think the only people that make money are the lawyers: Microsoft, AWS, Google, and Oracle, and the USDAD. In that instance, they just got to spend money.
Yeah. Well, it's usually once you bring lawyers involved, they're always the only ones that make money. But I think Google getting done here for search, we'll see what happens to that, right? And if they have to sell Chrome with the new Trump administration. I don't know how much it's going to change these antitrust investigations. Some people think it'll just put a stop to them, but I'm not so sure.
No, the first time round, Trump is who actually squashed Jedi. He paused it and then made them do some work, and then they cancelled it. So I wouldn't bet against him not doing it, but, what are you going to do? Float another company called Google 2 that's just a search engine and allow other people to aggregate results from your search engine? Or are you going to say, let's turn this incredibly useful bit of information off and no one can use it?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the sell of Chrome, I don't know if that makes much difference. I mean, people are still going to use Google in whatever browser they want. And I think Google's done enough developing Chromium to be able to make their applications run in a browser across any platform. So browsers, I mean, I think that was the problem. Microsoft didn't innovate the browser, so that's why Google had to, right? And they wanted to say web first.
Microsoft's browser now is Chromium under the hood.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the difference?
Was it the old joke used to be the most Googled thing from Bing is how to download Chrome?
Yeah. No. Yes. No. Yeah. How to download? That's the very first thing you do when you load a new computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Search for Chrome. I still think Microsoft is the real monopoly. They have 90+% of the Office suite, and email. I mean, I know a few tech companies that use Google apps, Google Workspace now. I think it might be just because they don't want to give their money to Microsoft, but and I would too. But most of the businesses, all governments I know outside of Germany, have signed on with Microsoft. And again, part of the problem I think is there's no real competition. I think it is we've spoken around in some of the Office products. Even Outlook, some of the the Exchange server stuff that really I think even Google is okay in some of their collaboration, email and scheduling collaboration, but it's probably still not as good as Microsoft's. And then Excel, as I've told you before, the Power Query in Excel, there's nothing else like it.
Hey,
right?
I'm all for the database of choice, and if we could get email on Excel, I wouldn't buy anything else from Microsoft. That's all I need. Don't have Visio. Let's draw it in Excel.
Yes. Oh, that's yes. If you go to the other episode with Damien and I talk about people using Excel as a project management tool, and I've seen headlines. Oh, how I use Excel in my project management. Please stop.
I want to put a whole lot of data in SharePoint. Oh, well, I'll import it via Excel.
So yeah,
it's just crazy how powerful it's become.
Yeah.
Oh, let's use Excel.
Yeah, it can front end for any database, basically anything that Microsoft has.
It's the 21st century access database.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It'd be like talking.
But yeah,
I don't want Office anymore. I'm just going to have Excel and Outlook. Unless you can show me how to get emails in Excel, then I don't want Outlook. And by the way, can you make it an operating system? Because that's all I want to buy. And we just run the world on it.
Yeah. Well, Microsoft's new Outlook is a web app.
Yeah.
So
SharePoint.
Yeah.
They're using that Chromium backend and skinning it with the application, which is really clever, because it's such a light delivery to the end user, and then I guess they already have an operating system that's sort of like the cut down Chromium, but you get to the point where, and I guess some of the higher end monitors, you see this now where you don't actually need a PC, you just plug your keyboard and mouse into the monitor and you connect to something virtually. at some point.
Yeah, that's been around for a long time, but now building it directly in Azure.
Yeah,
So
well,
with the Windows 11 VMs,
when you start getting Office 365 delivered by those apps, and all you need is a browser, you all of a sudden can have, instead of just browser from this single browser desktop, it's not actually got a compute. Just a really simple chip in there. You can start presenting these as separate apps, and you think you're on a desktop, but you're really just on what when we were young whippersnappers used to call a thin client.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a public thin client. Everything's.
Yeah, we used to turn old computers into thin clients. Yeah.
And I'll get my old grumpy Unix administrator hat on. Back when Solaris ruled the world, that's how they delivered everything through a Sunray, right?
Yeah.
When I wanted to change desks, I just pulled my card out, went set somewhere else, plugged it in, exactly where I left it.
Yeah. I have to say Chromebooks are pretty excellent. If you've ever used them for a lot of people that don't need to run something like Excel. And Power Query, if they need something basic, the Chromebooks run great, and they run, a lot of Android apps, and it's
Have you ever used, say, Apple's Office Suite or Google's Office Suite, or I remember back to OpenOffice, which was actually quite good, but didn't.
So I've used Google's, and lately I've played around with only Office and Nextcloud, and it's pretty good. LibreOffice, which was an offshoot of OpenOffice that's still developed, is capable, but it's ugly. And nobody would ever use it because it's stuck 20, the interface from 20 years ago. And it's like, come on, guys. But it still doesn't compete with the capabilities of Microsoft.
But about 90% of the time, they've got all the capability you ever need. So if we go back in time to when I was a Unix guy, we had Sunrays everywhere. They had multiple networks on your interface, and so I didn't have a Windows desktop. I just had a Sunray with virtual presented apps, and I was using OpenOffice in a predominantly Windows house, but because all of our code was compiled in Unix, so most people chose to write their code in a Unix terminal, right? But very rarely I would have to open up a Citrix version of an app, and usually it was only Visio, which didn't play well with Citrix at the best of times, so it was a bit of a wash. So I had to go and find a different terminal. Most of the time I have 3 different networks open and be looking at email from the OpenOffice. I can't remember the name of the client they had. It may even be part of the desktop rather than OpenOffice. But and it just works seamlessly with Exchange in the background. And you sort of wonder when some bright spark's going to come up with that antitrust agreement where they only want to buy one part of Office. They don't want to pay the whole lot, because the rest of the stuff their staff can do. Yeah.
Well, that's where they've won the email wars, right? So I think, now they host everybody's email because it's cheaper to get the email included with your Office suite. You hosted Exchange for free, right?
Gone are the days when they wouldn't tell anyone that Hotmail was hosted on Solaris and was actually SendMail.
Yes, I was an original Hotmail user. Still got a Hotmail address way before Microsoft bought them.
Did you ever play with SendMail as the back-end mail server?
Yeah.
That was an easy way to send yourself crazy.
I ran Communicate for a little while, which was built for like telcos that wanted to, internet service providers that wanted to do a cheap email solution for their customers, and that was open source for a little while. That was actually pretty good and really quick and easy. Well, sort of easy to get up and running. But played with a lot of those. But these days now, the cloud, everything's so cheap. You have things like Proton Mail. Zoho has a great actual suite of products. Zoho Mail, Zoho Accounting, Zoho CRM, and I think a lot of these products are actually really good. But businesses, once they get to a certain level, they won't even look at it. They're like, no, we just go with Microsoft.
Well, it's laziness. So I don't have to think if I just keep paying the license.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And ultimately,
well, actually,
if I can pass on the cost, I will. So I don't care.
Yeah. But there are companies that are innovating and trying to build, competing products, but it just feels like nobody's willing to give them a shot.
So you want to hear my conspiracy theory on Broadcom?
Yeah, go for it.
So they're going to price everyone else out of the market and wonder where all their companies went. And they'll only have this like top 10%, and it'll be really profitable for them because some smart guys worked out what their profit margin is. And all of this is complete fantasy in Jarrod's head, right? And then they'll go, but now everyone's getting a Microsoft, a Hyper-V and Azure, and they've cornered the market. Let's have an antitrust law case. And they'll sue Microsoft because their own business practices drove their own customers away.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. I think it'll be interesting to see if the antitrust continues with the investigation. The U.S. continues the investigation into Microsoft. I think it's very early days that they were talking about they're doing the investigation.
Look, it'd be uncharacteristic for the Department of Justice to back down. Because they won't start it unless they think it's got a real case. Now, their idea of what a real case is, and Microsoft's may be worlds apart, but they're not starting that action if they don't think they're going to win it.
Yeah. And my thing is, like, how do you let someone the size of Microsoft buy Activision Blizzard, in the gaming industry? It's like Microsoft already had a big gaming division and studios, and then you just let them buy the biggest one because they have the money to, this goes to, can Apple just go and buy TSMC or someone like that and then lock everybody else out, right? Because Apple has trillions of dollars in the bank or whatever it is. So, where does it stop?
Apple always weirds me out. No one ever picks on Apple for antitrust, but if they don't like your app, you can't sell it on their platform. There's no ifs or buts as you're out. Don't bother coming back. Yeah. And they'll sell you all sorts of things.
Epic and a few others have tried. I think Epic's the only one that's been able to foot the bill to actually bring big case against Apple. But yeah.
Well, Epic, you mean the healthcare company?
No, the game company.
Because Epic, the healthcare company, they actually have 3 separate mobile apps. So they don't have the same app for each platform, which is really weird, right? But it's along those lines if they weren't allowed to play nicely inside one of their ecosystems. So they just developed the other 2, and then when one of the guys realised I'm missing out, they developed a separate app for them. So they wouldn't have that problem again. But
yeah, I don't know how that European ruling against Apple to open up additional marketplaces to be able to download apps outside of the App Store is going. I think Epic Games actually put together their own App Store, and I think Apple didn't allow it, didn't approve it, but I don't know. I think they're backtracking now. I'm not sure where that's at, but not living in Europe, I'm not sure where it goes. But again, that's only for European iPhones.
But if you're a customer of Apple and you're a big enough enterprise, you can have your own App Store inside the App Store. And so your phones can only see these apps, but really it's just a cut down version of the App Store.
Yeah,
or sometimes you see the whole App Store, but you can only download certain ones.
Yeah.
So it is possible. But remember back to the open source days of Android, where you can just download whatever and go, "What's happened to my phone? The screen's black. It's going fire."
Well, you still can actually. You just have to do a couple of clicks to allow from different sources, but it's up to you. I mean, you do get the warning at least that you're downloading from an untrusted place or whatever it is. But are you sure you want to do this? But Windows and Mac, you've been able to do that as well. So
yeah. It strikes me that the Google Play Store is very similar to the Apple Play Store now, as they don't want you to go anywhere else. They will let you, but they don't want you. And But yeah, it'd be a bit harder to get them over the App Store now because the model is very similar between the two.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if Google's a predominant. It is a predominant phone manufacturer. Google Android's a predominant operating system. I don't know how big they are in the Android market though. But two major players are doing it, so it can't be all bad.
Yeah.
And then Samsung are a little bit there in the middle.
Well, Samsung makes the most money out of the Android manufacturers. Google itself doesn't make. I don't think they sell that many phones. Well, the phones are good. They don't sell near what Samsung would or Apple would sell, but they use that as the promo for Android, right? And
well, we want you to use our Google phone with our Google Android with our Google apps because we want to see what data you generate, and it's in the end user license agreement, so we can target ads at you or sell your data. That's their business model.
But don't tell me that Microsoft isn't doing that as well, especially Windows 11.
It happens in so many different places. It's not funny, right? This whole, you can't buy Huawei products for government projects because they may have a backdoor in. It's like, dude, US manufacturers have been doing this for years.
Yeah.
You just don't want someone else to do it. Yeah.
Yep.
Everyone's tracking data. Ask the app not to track. We asked them nicely, but they said no.
Yeah. I think Microsoft every update it tries to re-enable the tracking. It's good like that.
I can't wait to see what Calamity Copilot brings with it. There was a thing in the paper the other day about people using an in-enterprise version of Copilot, so you could search inside the enterprise or let Copilot help you. So, all the IT security people their ears are exploding at the moment because you've opened up all your access or you've given access to Copilot to your whole ecosphere. People were using Copilot to have it read the CEO's email. So, hey, Copilot, tell me what the boss's emails say today. And it was reading it back to him. I don't exactly know the full details of it, but Microsoft are like, we'll have it fixed for that by Monday.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff's going on. AI wrecks me, AI hallucination when they all get together and invent facts for you. You just read them. That's not even remotely true, you weirdos.
Yeah. I don't know. I've used AI some, obviously, but I've actually had really good experience with it, but I'm not trying to ask it lots and lots and lots of questions. So I use it basically for summarizing a bit of a topic, right? And I don't want to have to read 10 different websites, and that actually is really good. But I haven't tried.
It's the world's best tool for, God, how do I start this?
Yeah.
And then you read it and you go, that's great, or that's crap, or, now I know what not to do.
Yeah. Well, trying to find an example of, a policy document that you want to write.
Yeah.
And you used to search for days and days to find a starting point and just a sample to use without getting through somebody's paywall. And, now AI will spit you one out and you just tell it what what industry you're in, what you want it to do, and it'll write the whole thing for you.
Yeah. Gone are the days going, I don't really want to go to that web server because I'm pretty sure that's a ghost hosting something and it's going to be dodgy, and maybe I will open it and I'll build my own PC to do it. So if it dies, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Let's get OpenAI to find that document for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good thing within certain areas. I don't know how it's going to go in the long run, how it's going to change business. I'm sure it will.
To me, the interesting part about AI at the moment is the different approaches to different areas. So in healthcare in the EU, AI, no. You can't use it for delivering healthcare because they have policies around, some of the GDPR interferes with it, but they don't have clinical policies to cover its implementation. So their approach is no. You go to an American healthcare provider and say, hey, I'd like you to produce a widget for me in the hospital that does AI. And they're like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And because they're not, their guidelines are slightly different, and it's sort of they haven't been sued for it, so they're allowed to do it type mentality.
Yeah. Well, as long as it can be anonymized, they can do it.
Yeah.
Right. So
what you're sort of seeing, though, is that we're giving you AI, but when you look under the covers, they've already got a clinical decision support workflow. And all it's saying is instead of having to follow the bouncing ball, you can type stuff in and it takes you to the step. So some of it's not AI, some of it is AI. Some of it's saying, yeah, amputate the leg. And you think, but they came in for a headache.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, interesting times, Jarrod. I appreciate you jumping online and having a chat with me.
Oh, you're right. We didn't even talk about half the tangents I'd written down. So.
Well, I think we've had a good chat, and we'll probably pick it up another time.
All righty.
But thanks to everyone that is watching, and if you've got questions for myself or Jarrod, pop them in the chat, and maybe we'll have another session where we can answer those.
So. Yeah, that'd be good. If anyone is going to get questions, I won't give away state secrets. Sorry.
Keep watching if you want to hear about Jarrod's Navy career and his 25 years in defense. Thanks for joining. Yeah, give us a little background on your history in defense and other places.
Yeah, righto. Look, I ran away from home at the grand age of 17 and joined the Navy as an apprentice electronic technical systems sailor. I stayed for 12 years. During the time after the first 2 years of the apprenticeship, I joined HMAS Sydney, and we went on a Southeast Asia deployment, and then we're up in Anzac Cove for the 75th anniversary of Gallipoli, and then whilst we're already up there, we kept on going, so we did a world trip, went through Suez, Panama, and Kiel canals, with lots of ports in Europe. I was living the Navy dream. I think in Africa, the only place we went was Seychelles. Oh, actually, Egypt as well. And obviously Turkey, and then after we'd been through the Med and Northern Europe, we headed over to Canada and then did the east coast of the USA. And whilst we're at Norfolk Navy Base, Iraq and their infinite wisdom decided they wanted Kuwait. So all of a sudden our trip got cut short and we didn't go to South America, but went through the Panama Canal, refueled in San Diego, and that was a bit of a wild time. And then after San Diego, we sprinted to Hawaii and refueled again, and then sprinted to American Samoa and refueled again. And then we got to Sydney, and it was like 2 weeks of all this stuff you've never seen before in your life just got bolted to the ship. And then the Prime Minister at the time turned up, waved us goodbye, and off we went to Kuwait. And we were there for the whole length of the war. It was a pretty wild time. There was some things that started at the beginning that were, I'll never forget. Like we boarded a ship that was trying to run the blockade, and the Americans and the US Navy and the Royal Navy have been slightly economical with the truth about what they told us was going to happen, but they had SEALs flying by helicopter on one hand, and the Royal Navy had SBS, which is the Marine Special Forces, flying from the other end, and all we could hear is machine gun fire, and our crew was going over by boat, and I think they were dreading what they were going to find, but what they'd done is they'd landed and shot blanks everywhere and scared the bejesus out of everyone on the ship, and then came and tied them up. And then we took charge of the situation and guided them out of the Gulf. After the Gulf War was over, well, our Gulf War was over and our time was up, we came back to Australia. Did a maintenance period, and then 6 months later, we're heading back up to the Red Sea to enforce some UN sanctions on Iraq, mainly searching ships to make sure things weren't going into Syria or Jordan that were going to make their way to Iraq. I think we boarded something like 300 ships in 180 days.
Wow.
Which is quite wild. The helicopters are just dumping people on ships. And from a safety point of view, it never seemed like that at the time, but it was unsafe at the time. But you got told what the crew of the ship was, and then you'd ask them all to stand on the back of the ship, and you'd go over to board, but realistically, the only way you knew what the number was on the ship was that their last port of call, that's what they'd put on their manifest. So if they said there was only 20 people on the ship and you saw 20, or you'd probably see 18 people standing on the stern of the ship because they want to be on the bridge or want to be in the engine room, the fact that they had 5 stowaways, you had no way of knowing. So you used to spend the first hour searching the ship, which IBM form was quite a terse thing to do. So yeah, we spent that 6 months running in out of Egypt, and one of the rare occasions a warship was allowed to visit Saudi Arabia. Anyway, I got back from that, and then for my sins, I got sent on a second. I'd already done one. I got a second secondment with the US Navy. So I was in. There's a couple of Navy bases just south of Norfolk. I spent some time, about 9 months at one of them. It reminds me of something really weird that happened in my naval career. First time I got seconded to the US Navy, I met this guy, Charles, and we just become great friends, right? He was in the US Navy, I was in the Australian Navy. And then one day in the Red Sea, we got a call. The Americans had the same class of ship as us over there. And they wanted someone with my skill set to come over and give a hand to do something. It was dockyard maintenance stuff, but with enough people you could do it at sea. And I get over there and there's Charles. It was like, oh, yeah, this is my buddy from the US, and here he is here. We didn't know each other was in the Red Sea, but there we were. And then one day I'm in the Navy base, the second place I got seconded to, and I'm walking into the Sailors Club to have a beer after work, and there's Charles. It was like he followed us all around, and then we bumped into into each other again once in Singapore. It was just crazy. Anyway, it still blows my mind that was there, that ever happened. Cool. Came back from the US Navy, from the US that time, commissioned HMAS Newcastle. The Australian Navy had started building warships itself again, and they were building 2 of the Oliver Hazard Perry class frigates, which is an American design, and we already had 4 of them. So Sydney was one of those ships at the time, and that was sort of the kickstart shipbuilding in Australia. So they built 2 of them, and then it followed on. They built, I think, 10 Anzacs or 12 Anzacs. And then air warfare destroyers and the LHDs, which are things like aircraft carriers the Navy's got now. And in the middle there was the submarines were built as well. That was really interesting. Commissioning a ship is always a lot of fun. And Newcastle's a great port to call your home port. After that, I taught phalanx maintenance, which is the weapon system I'm specialised in. It's Phalanx is an automated self-defense system. The only thing you get off the ship is like 440 volts and salt water cooling. You do everything else yourself. Got this really clever radar. Well, it was really clever at the time. It's a little bit common now, but it's a primarily anti-missile defense system, and you find and track, you search and track your own missiles, and then you shoot at them with a Vulcan cannon, which most people refer to as a Gatling gun. This is a pneumatically driven 6-barrel 20mm cannon fired at 75 shots a second, and if your maths is any good, that's 4,500 rounds a minute. And depending on what your ammunition load was, either depleted uranium or tungsten. But a normal burst is only about 2 seconds, so it just sounds like a sheet ripping for 2 seconds and then it stops.
Wow.
And the designers then start to look for a following missile, which is a very common attack profile. An interesting thing about that is we had a 286. The 286 CPU computer was our maintenance computer, and we used to slow it down to 8 megahertz so it could talk to the weapon system, because the weapon system was using the same computer that the Apollo space program had used. And that's how slow it was. It was an 8 meg computer, but because it had such a limited instruction set, it was more than up to the task of what it needed to do. In later years, when they put more features into the system, they put a faster weapon computer in there, and it can do all sorts of neat things like optical tracking and switch between surface and air really quickly and those sort of things. But anyway, I taught that for a couple of years, and I realised the Navy was over for me. So I'm fortuitous meeting with another friend of mine. He said, come and work with us for 6 months. The project will be finished and what have you, and you'll have a bit more money in your pocket. You can go do whatever you want. And, that sort of made sense to me because my discharge date was in April. I'd actually tried to get discharged on April 1st because to me that was sort of summed up my naval career a little bit, but they weren't having any of that malarkey. So anyway, I got out in April and I started working on the Collins submarine project. And I got there just like 2 weeks after Boeing had taken over the project. And it was one of those things where Boeing had bought all the space shuttle programs because they wanted to own that vehicle in the US.
Okay.
So they opened up their portfolio book and they found this thing called the Collins submarine in there. And what the hell? Anyway, so to the credit though, they did a lot of work to stabilise the combat system. It was a weird time because technology had changed. So the start of that Collins submarine project, the 8086 was the predominant processor. And by the time Boat 2 hit the water, so there'd been a fair bit of build, Pentium 2 had been released. And so
that's a big change.
Yeah. And expectations changed with it, right? So people were expecting Pentium 2 type things from an 8086 based processor. By the end of it, it was 886 processors in there, and it's a unique combat system. And the US Navy built on a similar sort of architecture. They built 3 Seawolf, and then thought, no, this thing's got knobs on it. And the Royal Navy built 4 Upholder class, and then they physically lifted those submarines out of the water and put them on the hard stand and said, this thing's got knobs on it. They ended up selling them to Canada nearly a decade later, but they basically sold the hull because the Canadians put different internals in them. But no, we stuck it through and built all 6. And some of the design goals were really, really cool. Like the combat system was like M+6 redundancy. You could run the whole submarine from one terminal. You normally had 6 plus a chart table, which could act as a terminal as well.
Wow.
A single fiber optic backbone with 10 channels on it. It was proper glass fiber too. That's sort of the year of the technology. And then, anyway, so I was working away on that. Whole lots of weird stuff happened with the submarine project. And then the Australian Navy signed an agreement with the US Navy about submarine combat systems, and Boeing sold their whole Australian Naval Systems division to Raytheon. So they sold us all like common slaves. And Raytheon was the US Navy's combat system integrator. So it made sense from a lot of things because Boeing it was either leave the business or sell the division. So anyway, ended up working for Raytheon. And sometime along there, they decided it was easier to teach me Unix because I already had a background in the combat system and clearance and all that, than it was to try and find someone who was a Unix administrator and teach them about combat systems. And that's sort of how I got into IT. But
okay,
I was working for engineering at the time, so we were still writing code for what was release 2 of the combat system, which was stupidly stable. And then we're also writing code for the interim combat system. So a whole lot of, they bought some special bits to plug into the current combat system. And then at the same time, we were designing what would be the new, we weren't designing the combat system because it was basically lift and shift to the current US Navy's combat system. Albeit it had to have some mathematics change because there's very different. We've got diesel electric submarines. The US Navy's got nuclear submarines, and you operate them very differently. So you think about it, a nuclear submarine has got all the power, all the energy in the world it ever needs, and can go very fast for very long periods of time. Whereas a diesel electric submarine, you're really limited by your battery, and so you do things by stealth and slowly and make sure whatever you're going to do is going to count. Whereas the nuke side, you can just basically power your way in do something, that didn't work, and have another go, and then bugger off because you're not worried about power. You've got it in spades. So you have to change the way the combat system operates because you want it to do different things. Raytheon was a really interesting place to work. At some point, they moved me to corporate IT because engineering people started siloing things. Supporting software development environments wasn't an engineering thing; it was an IT thing. So that's where I went. But we did so many different projects and what have you. You sort of change jobs every couple of years. It was like having a brand new job and starting again, which was really good, right? So kept you interested. I did all sorts of things like classified networks. We built demonstrators for air shows. We had the contract for the F-18 simulators, so for the classic Hornet, not the Super Hornet.
Oh yeah.
So every now and then I go up to Williamtown to help those guys out. They unfortunately, Super or Hornet simulators don't move because if you can't simulate the G-force, what's the point?
Okay.
I was lucky enough to talk to a pilot one day and asked him if he flew the simulator differently, and he sort of cocked his head and looked at me and goes, "Yeah, I guess I do because I have to concentrate on flying in the simulator, whereas in the real aircraft, the flying part's all muscle memory. They're concentrating on driving a computer, and the body is just flying the aircraft for them." So that was sort of an interesting thing. We built bespoke intelligence systems. We fitted out army trucks, all sorts of things like
It
that.
sounds like it's a really interesting, different, diverse projects that you got to work on. I guess that's the advantage of working for such a big company that had wide range of projects.
Oh, look, we had this thing called a MacDine cave. If anyone wants to look it up, it's MacDine is the manufacturer, Cave's the product. It had like 72, 65 or 75-inch screens in a 330-degree circle. So you really had to crane your neck to look to the top. And we used to do 3D simulations in there so that the engineering guys would draw something in CAD. So say you were building a truck for someone, you would simulate, you'd draw it all in the CAD thing, and instead of manufacturing it to find out what works and what doesn't work, so you weren't prototyping, they'd pump all the data into this MacDine cave thing, and then you'd be in there with 3D goggles and 3D hands and what have you, doing simulated or human-machine interface type stuff. And so you'd find things that didn't work, right? Like that drawer couldn't pull out, or no, that's all too close, or we can't both work here and stuff like that. And prototyping went from, 2 to 3 years to 6 months. And you're saving, man years worth of labor. And so your project costs really got down, but man, it was crazy some of the stuff we used to do in there. You'd be really boring to do a finance review and have the world's largest spreadsheet 330 degrees around the room. You can accurately see something like 500 or 600 columns, and the finance people are going, "Oh, that's where the problem is. It's over there." Yeah. Stuff like that. That was really cool. And the business model was really cool. We did just do stuff that defence didn't want to do. Like we had helicopters released to the Navy because flying Seahawks is expensive, but crashing Raytheon's helicopters isn't that expensive. So they were pretty happy with that for a while.
Yeah.
We classified a Learjet as a Class C container, which meant under defence, under the way they operate, it was basically a flying safe because it was full of all sorts of electronic stuff. One time we sold a missile system to the Army on you have to buy the launchers, but you only have to pay for what you shoot type deal.
Oh, yeah.
And they thought it was the greatest idea ever. But when they came back from the deployment they wanted it for, they just bought thousands of them because they were so happy with how it happened, What else did we do there? Oh, one of the big things I'm sort of happy about, I'm really happy about my time there was Defence has this really waterfall approach to project management. So if I'm building a ship, I build a network for the shipbuilding enterprise, and then when that program's over, you tear it all down, they archive stuff to tape, and all that build data, it's not lost, but it's pretty hard to access. So towards the end of the Air Warfare Destroyer project, which is, it's long finished now, but we started a project with Defence to build the naval shipbuilding project. It's now in all their shipyards, but they now mandate for your project, so the Hunter class are doing this, you have, and the Arafura class they're building, and the Cape class they're building, which is a patrol boat. The Hunter class is a big frigate. It's actually bigger than our destroyers, but anyway. They have to use this network, and now the data is no longer lost, right? So they've got all this really neat live data that they keep for the life of that artifact or that ship, which is interesting for maintenance and what have you. But more importantly, they're not building a new computer network every 10 years. They're just constantly, normal life cycle management through it. And it's an artifact that's going to exist forever, for them. Which is, it was really, it'll never get any headlines because it's not shiny and pointy and make bang noises, but it was a really good thing for the Navy.
Yeah. I think NASA's shown that they've keeping what are the two satellites that are now out past the Milky Way or past our galaxy. They've got like 1950s technology that they're still making it run and still making it work.
When I was with Boeing, I worked on a guy who worked, it wasn't Apollo, but it was the rocket program before Apollo. He'd worked on that. And he told me all sorts of wild stories I'm not going to repeat, but the one thing I remembered him saying was the worst thing about working on a rocket program is you're sitting there watching, wait for it to go off, and if it blows up, you're going, I wonder what happened there, because all the evidence just exploded. He said they'd spend weeks, or probably months, just looking at high-speed photography to work out for the first instance of a bit of problem, and it's usually a bit of smoke. And then they knew the problem existed at that time point backwards. Yeah, but that's all the evidence they'd ever get.
Yeah.
He said it was crazy, some of the stuff they used to do.
Yeah, I think things have changed now with SpaceX and how they everything has its own telemetry and sensors and sending that real time to
IoT and that stuff is so cheap now. It's really easy to put a monitor somewhere and just hook it up by IP, and then turned off at this point in time, which means this broke.
Yeah. So was it SpaceX had a rocket failure not too long ago, and they were within a month they were already relaunching because they were able to get all that data so quickly and know exactly what happened. So I think things have massively changed in that area. Just the speed at which they can gather that intelligence and make the changes.
Yeah,
crazy. So you're finishing. So you spent a lot of time at Raytheon, and then you moved into corporate IT.
Yeah, I was corporate IT at Raytheon for a while. I still think I'm the only Australian Raytheon employee ever to get a vice president's award. So, a lady by the name of Rebecca Rhodes was the CIO of Raytheon at the time and the vice president of global business systems. If you ever wonder how big US defense companies were, they're not this big anymore. Her yearly budget for IT was $990 million US dollars. And there were 4 divisions who had their own IT budget. So she was only doing the global part of it. Wow. That was pretty cool. She was also on the board of directors for IBM. And at the time, I guess, she was probably the most powerful lady or woman in technology. And she was bloody good at what she did, Quite an inspiring leader in a lot of respects. That was Raytheon with 60,000 people, 60,000 employees worldwide, although, they say worldwide, I'd say 95% of those people were in the US. And then after that, not long after that, there was a merger of equals with Raytheon and a company called UTC, which UTC were Pratt and Whitney, Collins Aerospace, and then two other companies that they divested into a separate entity. And Raytheon merged with UTC. It was put up as the merger of equals, but UTC already owned 51% of Raytheon, so it wasn't that equal. There's no ex-Raytheon people at the very highest level in that company anymore. And now Raytheon's a single division inside that. Inside the company that became RTX, so Raytheon Technologies, but they no longer use that term. They just call themselves RTX. Not a really good, from a business point of view, that they sucked value out of Raytheon because that's what UTC do. But from a
oh, we know that story quite well, don't we?
Yeah.
Very common in technology.
Yeah, well, but what UTC were really after is their two divisions. So Pratt and Whitney built jet engines, and Collins Aerospace do all sorts of electronics, but are very heavy in commercial aviation. So you all of a sudden had a company that was really balanced. So defence contractors tend to do well when commercial aviation isn't doing well, and vice versa. And they have the best of both worlds because people don't tend to travel a lot if defence are doing defence things. Then so that sort of worked out quite well for them, But that's a massive company. I was like, they ran the knife through Raytheon to get rid of the dead weight. But worldwide, that company's 180,000 people. It's crazy large. And so whilst they were making that change, they decided they didn't need Jarrod anymore, and they made me redundant. So after that 6-month project, it took me 25 years to leave. So it's a bit of a wild ride,
That's a long 6 months.
Yeah.